The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Gate City Chronicles. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today we're joined by somebody who represents Harbor Homes, Mr. Robert Sibley. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So, Harbor Homes, what is Harbor Homes?
So, Harbor Homes is actually associated with the Partnership for Successful Living. It's a nonprofit located in Nashua, basically the greater Nashua area. We have a few places in Milford as well, counseling center over there. But really what we're here in Nashua is to provide services to people who need it. And mostly it's the underutilized individuals, people who can't afford services, who are in tight situations, and really trying to build that gap where people who just can't afford things, and we're trying to help them so they can get those resources when they're needed.
Harbor Homes is not the same as Habitat for Humanity, or
correct. It's not the same exact, but it's so the best way I can describe Harbor Homes is it's a mental health center. It's a clinic. We provide dental services as well, and we're also part of the partnership with Keystone Hall. So we provide also rehab services for people who are dealing with substance abuse issues. We work with the AIDS Task Force. We're part of in the partnership with them, Milford Counseling Center, as well as also a training center called Welcoming Lights. And then, of course, Harbor Homes is also associated with that as well.
Now, is there a specific thing that Harbor Home does as opposed to what all the other ones do? Or are you a connector, or are you a conduit?
We're very much a housing-based program. We're built on the model of housing first. We have about 1,000 beds available. We house 2,000 people, and we are here to provide also mental health counseling. Like I said before, clinical services. We have a full staff there with nurses, doctors who can provide physicals and daily routine physicals that people might need going into services. And then we have a behavioral health wing that basically we can provide full services when it comes to just mental health disorders.
Behavioral health?
Yes.
What is that?
So when we're talking about behavioral health, we're looking at people who are dealing with struggles with coping with things, anxiety, depression. We're dealing with substance abuse, people who have issues with alcohol, heroin, and other drugs that basically are currently an epidemic, I would say, right now in the country as a whole.
Right.
And it's basically a very undertapped service right now in the field. We need more clinicians. We need more people to be focusing on this with people who are suffering on this on a daily basis.
Now, how does that differ from the state hospital?
So there's not a lot of difference, only in the sense that we take a lot of our funding through grants. We do grant funding and stuff on those lines. We have to really kind of work to make sure we have funding to provide services. We have a federally qualified health center.
Now, where's that located, by the way?
So that's at 45 High Street in the heart of Nashua. We're basically right off of the main street by the parking garage. If you know Nashua's in that little area, the little niche spot.
Kind of nice where that little circle area is.
Correct.
In between that and the
Clock
main street.
Tower and there.
Yeah, so.
Exactly. And that's where we have our behavioral health center. We have our clinic. We have our dentistry there as well. And then we also have partial hospitalization, which is for people who are in partial treatment for substance abuse, where they spend half the day going through group therapy and working on their treatment plans and kind of coping skills, and it gives them a stepping stone, I would say, towards recovery process.
Yeah, now, if people are familiar, there's a program on television called Intervention. And sometimes when they get people involved with an intervention, they send them to a place. It could be Light in the Sky Facility Center or something to that effect. And they usually bring them there for about 90 days. Is this something similar to that?
With Keystone Hall, we have a 28-day program, we have a 3-month program, and we also have a 6-month program. So it really is varying on individual by individual basis. Really, I would say the focus is to really focus on what does this individual need specifically, and what can we do to best serve that individual at their time and where they are in their own personal recovery process. So I would say that we're always looking to provide the best service for the client itself. We're very much focused on, there's not going to be one set plan that's going to fit everybody. We understand that. We need to make sure that we're working with what the client needs as they come towards us.
When you say a client, that automatically genders that, well, I'm broke, I don't have any money. Can you still take care of me, that type of thing?
Of course, but it really, when we're thinking clients, we're thinking of the consumer, the individual, the person that is reaching out for help.
Okay.
And we're really not, I would say, although we will never turn somebody away, we will make sure we can find funding for it, or we will make sure we'll get it done, I guess is the best way to say it.
So as far as transitioning, sometimes people fall through the cracks, they fall through the hole, they made some bad choices or some bad things have happened to them, and they find themselves not being able to get out of it. They don't know how to transition from one area in life into say an occupation, or getting out of that hurdle and getting into a paying job because you know they made some bad choices and now they got a record. Can you help them with that?
So we have actually different programs. We have programs actually that are very veteran-based. There's programs called the HVRP, which basically focuses on specifically employments for veterans and helping them get connected with services like that. We can help them get suits, we can get them trainings if they need trainings, we can help pay for schooling if schooling is something they need. And it really, once again, goes individual by individual, but really the focus here is what do we need to get these individuals into mainstream life? Independent, successful, and hopefully happy.
Do you work at all with My Turn by any chance? Have you ever?
No, not specifically.
Okay. That's another organization that helps people that, you know, basically have a record. They made some bad choices, and it's hard to,
of course,
get a job because you got a record. So they help
get that foot through the door and kind of help them through that process.
How about with the community colleges or schools? Do you work at all with them?
We will always kind of work with the schools in the sense of community-based kind of education, things like that. And then, of course, we're kind of with mobile crisis, and we're also planning on trying to get connected with the school systems with that kind of programs like that as well.
Now, when you're receiving federal grants, I assume they're federal grants and probably some grants from the state as well.
Correct.
And I'm sure, I know the state is actually, in this next budget, hopefully it passes, they've funded a lot towards, you know, the opioid situation. Are you able to receive donations from businesses?
I believe overall we're always willing to work with businesses to kind of support this. I mean, we're trying to really work on an epidemic right now in the community when it comes to substance abuse issues. So we're always willing to kind of, whatever people are willing to work with us, provide, help out with, we're never going to be turning things away like that if it's going to help the community.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned something about a mobile crisis unit.
So the Mobile Crisis Response Team is a brand new program that Harbor Homes has received through the state. We're going to be one of 3 branches in New Hampshire. There's one in Concord, there's one in Manchester, and we're going to be the 3rd one in Nashua. And so what Mobile Crisis is basically a program that is a 24-hour, 7 days a week phone triage system that is answered by a master's level clinician who can provide in the moment treatment in the sense of providing suicide assessments, crisis intervention kind of services, as well as kind of figuring out what type of environment they're in, because part of our program is we're going to be able to go into the community and see these individuals face to face. And the goal here is to be, we get a phone call, we assess the situation, say the individual is suicidal, things like that, we call 911 and get them the service they need right through instantly, obviously. But say we have somebody who doesn't quite fit into that mold of hospitalization. They don't really need to go to the hospital, they don't need to go to the ER, but the issue is right now that's kind of like their two options when it comes to the middle of the night, or there's just nothing in the sense of services that can sometimes just be that instant. So what this is going to provide now to the community is a instant connection. We get a phone call, we're working with you right then and there. We're then, if it's a situation where we can't resolve all of, over the phone, we're going to go into the community, drive to where you are or to a location that you feel safe meeting somebody at, and we're going to begin doing de-escalation therapy, solution-focused therapy.
What is that?
So these are types of evidence-based practices or treatments that will basically help an individual kind of come back down, hopefully calm down to their situation, start thinking and reframing their thoughts so that potentially they can start relaxing. So that what can really happen after that is we can start looking at what's the core belief, what's the chief complaint, if you will, to this individual's situation. So that when we figure those things out, we can start building a treatment plan for them. We can start connecting them with other services in the community and really provide them with wraparound services that typically right now are available, but you're not going to get it, but within your best bet is 24 hours to 48 hours after you make a phone call.
What is wraparound services?
So wraparound services really is looking at the idea of, I like to always think of it almost as your circle of life in a certain thing. You have all these little things. You got your independent life, you got your career, you got your family, you got spirituality, and you just kind of have these little areas of your life that you have to be connected to and kind of fulfill in your life. The idea here is we're going to be starting to look at what things are you missing, or what things are you complaining about, or what things are really bothering you in your current life. And then what we can start to do is looking at behavioral health counseling or getting you connected with clinics that can help you with physical complaints or issues that are more on the medical side. And then while also connecting you with maybe housing resources in the community or benefit resources that could help you just get stepping stones, if you will, towards that successful living of where they want to be. And the other aspect to this is that for a lot of these individuals, they're not aware of a lot of these services.
Right.
They're unaware that these services even exist in their community. And I mean, that could also just be in the fact that they're not living in the heart of Nashville. They might be in those surrounding towns where those types of services they're there, but they're not as apparent like it is in Nashua. What this can basically do is now start to connect those people to these services and make them realize that they're not alone in this process. There's other resources here for them, and that at the end of the day, there's ways we can help you get out of the situation and help you along the way so that you become more independent, more successful in your own thought process, and more importantly, become more mainstream and independent in your overall life.
We had some guests testify when we were up at the Capitol on the Narcan. We had a study commission, and we had some people that were saved by Narcan.
Yep.
And one of the gentlemen that was overdosing at one time because there were no services that he knew of that were available.
Yep.
He basically said that he was going to commit suicide so that he could get emergency services.
Yep.
Now, there's a downside to that. The upside is he made a complicated decision because he knew he needed help. He's strung out. He's going to crash. I guess it's called tweaking or something to that effect. And he needed help.
Yep.
So he said he was going to commit suicide so he could get admitted. And of course, then they took care of him. But now he has this on his record that, he went to that extreme.
Yep.
And job applications seem to be
Affected
by that.
Yeah.
So that creates a spiraling effect, a cause and effect, cause and effect. And what you're telling me, it seems to fit the need for those people that don't know that you can get help. You don't have to go to extremes in order to get that help.
Yeah, and the goal here is to hopefully get them to call before they get to those extremes, obviously. And then so like if someone, like in the example you've given us, given here, is that so someone like that gives us a phone call, we're going to instantly go, okay, we're dealing with somebody who's suicidal, but we're also dealing with somebody who's dealing with more on the lines of what sounds like a substance issue. Mm-hmm. And if we do a suicide assessment, find that they're not really suicidal, it's more they're really just looking for help, then what we can then do is then refer them to Safe Station, which is run through, basically what that is in Nashville, if you go to the fire station, basically tell them you're dealing with this issue. I have substance abuse issues, I'm dealing with heroin addiction, et cetera, et cetera. What it provides them to do is they can do a full physical there, and then but also bring them back to Harbor Homes potentially for medical respite is something that we provide where they have a bed, they can stay there, and we can help them get through that first few phases.
And they can come and go as they please, correct?
So once they leave, it's more on the lines of when you're in respite, you're there. We want you to begin the process of recovery, and when we basically, the discharge happens when you have your next steps. Your next steps are set up, your next plan, so if it's going to Keystone, if it's going, which is the rehab center we were talking about earlier, or maybe it's PHP, which is Partial Hospitalization Program, which is a hybrid version of kind of rehabilitation, and then there's IOP, which is an inpatient-based, or not inpatient, it's a in the Harbor Homes where you can provide outpatient services for people dealing with substance abuse issues. And so from that aspect, Mobile Crisis can be that bridge program to those things. But say you have somebody who's calling, who's not dealing with a substance abuse issue, but they're dealing with a crisis. Yep. They're dealing with something that won't really provide them services in the hospital. The hospital will obviously take them in, they'll do evaluations, and they'll make sure that they're not suicidal, they're not going to hurt themselves. But at the end of the day, that's really where their services kind of have to stop for right now. It's nothing against it, it's just what it is right now.
Right.
And so what this kind of does for us is they can give us a phone call, we can start that process with them and kind of figure out what's going on. And so another kind of caveat to what Mobile Crisis can provide here is that, so say they're in a situation where they have nowhere really safe to go, but they're also in a place where it's not a safe place to put them into a shelter or a mission just because they're just escalated. They're still in a little bit of a crisis state. They're not kind of settling down. We do have 4 crisis apartments that we're going to have set up for them.
Now you said there's 1,000 beds available?
So this is through Harbor Homes as a whole. Okay. So we have a lot of housing.
Statewide?
This is through all the way up to Claremont. We have housing. And then we have places in Manchester as well. And then the core of it would be in Nashua, though, okay, to be honest with you. But what we can provide through those services is we have a lot of permanent housing programs. These programs can basically, we have everywhere from short-term apartments for veterans, which is run through Harbor Homes, and partnered with kind of the VA in the sense of this allows veterans to get bedding for up to 6 months. And then we have other apartments that are more for kind of like the Maple Street shelter, where we can get them a place to sleep and kind of get them case management work so that they can be housed and hopefully through that process get their stepping stones they need.
Is Harbor Homes, was it exclusive for veterans?
No, it was not exclusive for veterans, but we realized through the years that there was a need for it. There was too many homeless veterans in the state of New Hampshire, and we finally kind of put our foot down and started taking it very serious.
Before we got on camera, we were talking a little bit about the cycle, and that, you know, a one-time treatment isn't a fix for all.
Yeah.
There is a cycle. Sometimes recovery takes a journey. That is a journey in itself.
It's a journey, yeah.
There's relapses, and hopefully they're longer in between. But there needs to be an understanding that it's not an overnight thing. These things didn't happen overnight.
Of course.
And the recovery process is complicated. Could you explain a little bit about that?
So what I would say is that this is more of a cultural thing I think we need, or just an education thing, in the sense that when we think of substance abuse as a whole, I think the general idea is once you get treatments for a lot of kind of just the general population. When you get treatment, cool, then you're done. But I think when you're somebody who's dealing with the actual disorder, you're dealing with alcohol, you're dealing with heroin, that there is a lot more that kind of comes along with that, in that every individual has a different path with that process, so that when we're going through the treatments, you have people that will do amazing. You'll have them go through the entire treatment process, they're in recovery, they leave, they're in maintenance, and they're trying to maintain a very healthy life. And then it's sometimes the littlest things. The very first nice
Trigger.
day of summer, and they go, oh,
I
it feels
just
great
feel-
out here.
Yeah.
And then it's just, I'm going to have a beer.
A nice cold beer.
And then the cycle begins again.
All over again.
Because the issue with it is that I think alcohol is the easiest way to talk about it, because it's like you just have one. For many people, that's okay. But it's somebody who's dealing with alcoholism, they're dealing with the disorder itself, they know they can't just have one. The moment they've opened Pandora's box, so to speak,
You start right where you left off.
it all begins
And it could
again.
be a beautiful day, it could be a bad moment.
Exactly, and it can occur at any point. So there's a lot of process when it comes to treatment planning. It's recovery planning, it's trigger protection, it's working with individuals on their needs, so that when they have something that's a coping skill issue, or they're having issues when it comes to a trigger, they see this certain person, they have these certain environments. It's working with them so that when they get into those environments, they're best equipped. They have a toolbox, so to speak, of different ways they can try to work around it to best keep themselves in a healthy place.
How long have you been with Harbor Homes?
So I've been working with Harbor Homes for about 5 years. I started off as a volunteer, actually, while I was finishing up my master's, as working for what was the SAMHSA program. That kind of is we were providing free case management and therapy to people who were at risk of being homeless, and kind of helping them get through that kind of coping skills, things that just are very difficult to deal with in that moment when you might be losing your housing, and then you kind of have to, it kind of becomes a domino effect for some people. It was kind of a way to provide them a little bit of stress release. So we kind of make sure they're not alone in that process. And then I actually moved into the second SAMHSA grant right after that, when that first one closed down, and moved into the second one. And that one was actually veteran-based. And that one where we were working with homeless veterans who basically were dealing with homelessness, with a lot of issues with substance abuse, mental health issues, PTSD, things of that nature. And then over time, we were doing very well with that. We actually got our grant modified so that we could end up seeing civilians as well. So we became a 50-50 grant, so we could see 50% veterans, 50% civilians. It worked very well for us in that, in the sense that, very similar to the first SAMHSA grant, we're providing free case management, free counseling. And that grant is closing down actually this coming September. So it's kind of lived out its term, and then we're hopefully going to get the third SAMHSA grant coming in September.
That's federally funded?
Yep, and but that's still down the road. We'll find out if we get it or not, hopefully in the next few months.
So this might be a tough question. How do you measure the success of these programs?
So there's a lot of data collection. I mean, obviously, we're doing a lot of this stuff, and we're collecting a lot of information, because it's kind of what's needed right now. We need to understand
Instead of just throwing money, because people, you're hearing large amounts of money being
of
thrown at
course.
these, and people want to, you know what, we're willing to help, but we don't want it to be wasted, and it's kind of a tough question to ask,
Yeah.
because they want to see results, they want to help, they want to see people back on their feet and living independent again, and there is a metric somehow of
course.
success.
So I would put it on the lines of that with every kind of grant we get, kind of like with Mobile Crisis, we're going to be collecting information to make sure that we're meeting the population needs, we're decreasing unnecessary hospitalizations, we're going to be focused in on making sure that law enforcement, are they involved or not involved in these types of situations, and so that what we're really looking at here is how are we filling a gap here. And we want to make sure that that gap's actually being helped. And so we're always looking for information. We're always gathering this information so that we can better understand what is needed for the community, so that what we're kind of talking about here is that we spend it wisely, that we're not just throwing things at a problem and hoping it goes away. We're trying to do it in such a way that it's going to be meticulous and feasible, and it shows results.
So, that being said, are we addressing the root of the problem?
So I think we're getting closer and closer to the root every time, because I think what we're really dealing with here is education, connections to service, and a need that is that these people who are not being connected with service, how can we get them connected? Because really, the people that aren't getting these services are the ones who end up having the biggest crisis. They're the ones who have the fallout, the suicide, as you were talking about earlier. And if we can educate and get this information to people sooner, getting them aware of what's available so that when they can, it's almost preventative care, if you will. Mm-hmm. Let's start nipping it in the butt before it becomes the real big issue that we're really trying to avoid. And so I think with mobile crisis, that's exactly kind of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be preventative or proactive, if you will. The idea that these people are starting to have crisis, they're in a crisis. So before it becomes overwhelming and before they end up in the hospital or they end up doing something that they're going to regret, they have an outlet. They have a place to start.
When is this going to be up in full gear?
So we're planning on being up and running on July 1st. And we'll, like I said, we'll be a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone line that you can call. And if needed, we will have beds as well. So we can provide 7 days of housing for people who just need a safe place to de-escalate, calm down, and build a plan for themselves.
What is the name of the website, or that is going to be up?
It's going to be Harbor Homes /MCRT.org.
Is there a phone number to that?
Yep, so just for disclaimer purposes, it won't be up and running until July 1st. So if you give a phone call to it right now, you're going to get a deadline.
Right.
But it's going to be 603-816-0101.
Could you say that one more time?
Of course.
A little bit slower.
603-816-0101.
And that'll be online July 1st.
Yeah, July 1st, we'll be up and running, and we will be helping the community any way we can.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey,
we
thank you very
appreciate
much,
everything
Kevin.
that you're doing. And folks, if you need help, if you're in a crisis, or if you know somebody that is in a crisis or may be in a crisis, don't hesitate to call that number when the time is ready in July 1st. And if you have a story that you'd like to share here on Gate City Chronicles, I'd be happy to bring you on the show. Until next week, thanks for watching Gate City Chronicles. Thank you for watching Gate City Chronicles. And we want to thank our sponsor, Aardvark Cleaning. They've been a sponsor for quite a few years now, and we appreciate them being a sponsor. And if you want to be a guest on our show, contact accessnashua@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story. Until next week, thanks for watching.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.